Hey guys, how's it going? KRIPP'S here. It's that time again. Diablo 4 releases Season 8, actually a day after you're watching this video, so it may already be released. And Season 8 brings a bunch of new stuff, a bunch of changes, and we are back to playing Minions, of course. So today I'm going to show you guys what I will be playing. So what you're seeing here is actually from Season 6, because it's the last time I played a Minion Necromancer, but we're actually going to play a pretty similar build. There are a lot of mechanics that really encourage this character specifically, and what you're seeing is actually day 2 of Season 6, so it's very, very early on, and I'm absolutely crushing Torment 4 dungeons. I was actually higher Paragon level than even the groups in the first couple days. Basically, playing Minion NECRO, it's just like the best leveling experience. It's an absolute monster starting out and clearing. And clearing is actually the name of the game in Season 8 because a few mechanics are changing fundamentally. The build that I will go over will be on Mobalytics. If you guys want the written form, I will go over quite heavily in today's video. Make sure to click on the link in the description so you can have it as you're playing the character. A really big part that they're changing in Season 8 is that they're making it so you can level glyphs when you're much lower than the normal requirement. So before, if you wanted to max out your glyphs, you pretty much had to do like pit level 100. You don't really need to do that anymore because you can level your glyphs at like pit level 60 or 70. And this is a really big difference because doing pits very quickly was actually the best way to grind out Paragon levels. So now you can grind Paragon levels at the same time as you're actually maxing out your glyphs. So you really want a build that can just absolutely crush and breeze through content early on, and the Minion NECRO is actually one of the very best builds in the game to do that. Now, if you're talking about really late game stuff, so like, you know, the highest pit clears possible by the numbers, Minion NECRO might actually be there, and I'll explain in a minute, but the top theory crafters of Diablo 4 put Blood Wave and Bone Spear and possibly a few other blood builds in the very top of the category. So what I'm trying to say is Necromancer, even if you want to play something other than Minions later, and now it's a lot easier to kind of like respec and have multiple builds at once, Necromancer seems to be actually the best class in Season 8 by the numbers. Of course, things can change, and one of the things that has changed is boss powers. So boss powers are coming to the game. In the PTR event, you're going to see a lot of footage from people who are just crushing with the boss powers like crazy. They pretty much nerfed all of them into the ground. Right now, they're mostly just auxiliary effects. And this is actually a good thing for Minion NECRO because you weren't really scaling the boss powers to the degree that the other classes were. So there's lots of different effects that you can use for your main boss power. The only one that can reliably increase damage is if you're channeling a skill, you can make the target take 50% more damage, and that might actually be a good idea to use like Decompose instead of like Blight or instead of Decrepify. Now, I'll leave it to you if you really want to use that. I think I will use the Urivar's Lobbed Bombs. It just does a bunch of bombs when you use your ultimate ability. It's not like a crazy amount of damage, but after they nerfed the damage like crazy in the recent patch notes, they also gave the Lobbed Bombs a passive 15% cooldown reduction. So probably a lot of people are going to use that because 15% cooldown reduction is a significant amount, especially in builds that use a lot of cooldowns. There are two auxiliary powers, the minor boss powers, I think they're called, that give you damage multipliers. There is one that gives you vulnerable damage, and it's increased by your crowd control duration bonus. So that's not great. You may want to have like 1 CC duration roll on your gear to kind of bump this up a little bit, but certainly not mandatory. Nevertheless, 5% damage multiplier to vulnerable. You can get minion damage. Now, this bonus, I think, instead of capping out at 150% more, caps out at like 11% more now. Again, they massively nerfed the boss powers, so just be mindful of that. But it's still a new multiplier. Why not? And there are other powers that give you attack speed. One gives attack speed, and one gives critical strike chance. You pretty much want to move between the one that you need to max out your attack speed or critical strike chance. Now, I mentioned that Minion NECRO is probably flying a little bit under the radar, and that is because of the reworked Zan rune. So this is actually not updated. It'll be probably updated by the time you're looking at the guide. They changed Zan rune from your next skill will guaranteed crit and overpower to it'll be a 0.35, I believe, second window where all of your skills crit and overpower. And this is passed on to your minions, and your minions can actually overpower because of this. And the Ahu rune is also massively buffed. Instead 100% chance against injured, it will be 100% chance on non-healthy. So injured is below 35, non-healthy is below 85. And it'll give 15 offering when it procs. So basically, your minions now get Lucky Hit as of Season 7. They're proccing Lucky Hit like crazy. And whenever they proc Lucky Hit with the Ahu rune, you're going to be getting 15 offering. You're basically going to get an insane amount of offering, and with the new Zan rune, your minions are going to actually overpower. Now, their overpower damage is based on your health, so it's a good idea to get some extra health on your character because that will actually result in more overpower damage from your minions. But overpower in Diablo 4 works as 50% more damage, just straight up, for overpowered hits, and also it's your total life and fortified life compared to how much base life you have. And the base life is so low that typically characters that use overpower are looking at thousands, perhaps 10,000 additive damage. So it's a huge damage boost, and from what I've seen of other theory crafters other than Macro Bio Boy, which of course credit to him for this combo, are not really considering in their tier lists. So that's why I think the Minion NECRO will outperform what most tier lists will say. So just be mindful of that. This is a fun build because you can use it straight from level 1. Minions in Diablo 4 are actually pretty fun to play, and they work pretty well. You're going to have a lot of flexibility in the skills, and you're going to have a lot of flexibility in the gear as well. So the Shroud of False Death, the Uber Unique, Mythic Unique, whatever they're called, for the chest piece is probably going to be your best choice, but it's probably the last one you're going to get. Debatable with Grandfather, I'll explain in a second, but Air of Perdition is certainly the first one you want to get. This is straight up a 60 damage multiplier on your helmet. Lucky Hit chance is huge now because, like I said, your minions are proccing damage against injured or non-healthy now. It's going to be overpowered uptime, so that's huge. So much potential here. The move speed will help you just mow down monsters a lot faster. A lot of this stuff is explained, so the aspect of Great Feast will actually chunk down your spirit, your essence, like crazy, but it only does that in values. So if you put the aspect on your amulet, if you have, like, let's say 10 minions, it'll cost you 2 per minion, which means it'll only reduce your spirit down when you have a total of 20 spirit in that case. So you are actually able to cast cheap spells like the Curse or even Blight. We also have Soul Rift to give us a whole bunch of essence back, so you'll be able to just cast whatever you want with Soul Rift. It's a good idea to get Soul Rift duration on some of your pieces, and Tendrils size, of course. Now, there are a lot of aspects. We are, for the first time ever in D4 for Necromancer, we have too many good aspects. That's right. So instead of Hardened Bones, you can use the Shroud of False Death. You can also use Blood Getters, which gives you 21%, actually 22.5% more damage because you are affected by the Skeleton Priest buff as well. So if you want damage, you can use that. If you want defense, you can use Hardened Bones. It's actually okay if your minions die now because they added an enrage mechanic, 20 more minion damage for 3 seconds when one of your minions dies. So it's actually okay to have like mediocre minion survivability because if they die, you actually do more damage. So very cool mechanic there. And because attack speed and all that is so important, Frenzy Dead aspect is really decent. You may actually choose to not use a two-hander so you can attack a little bit faster. So using 2 aspects instead of Grandfather is possible. You can use the Frenzy Dead. You can use Fists of Fate in your glove slot. You can use 30 damage while you have a barrier. It's just like everything works now that they fixed minions in Season 7. And with Season 8, you have so many things that you can play around with. If you haven't played Necro Minions in a while, they redid the Blood Moon Breaches, so you can get your minions to apply curses. And this is really interesting because the new Iron Maiden has Lucky Hit on its procs. You get more Lucky Hit procs, which is more overpower uptime from the rune combo. Really cool stuff there. In terms of the minion breakdown, you're going to see a lot of builds that don't use Golem. I think the build is about like 10% stronger if you don't use a Golem and you instead sacrifice it. I think it's the Iron one for 35% crit damage multiplier. Now, why would you do that? Well, you would do that if you're pushing like the highest pit clear, but you wouldn't really do that if you're just like playing the game normally. If you're playing the game normally, the golem that causes it to shed 5 corpses on the use is insanely good because you make your golem jump into the middle of the pack and you're able to do a perfectly positioned corpse tendrils off the corpses that is summoned. You're never going to have shortage on corpses, which is really big because it enables you to use the Skeleton Warrior Skirmisher, which deal more damage, have less life. Less life is good because if one of them dies, you get the Enrage bonus now from Kalan's Edict, and having an extra one is a pretty big damage buff. We're using the Skeleton Mages for Shadow. Now, I have tested the minions in preparation for this video, and you're going to see a lot of people use like the Blood Golem for Mendeln because it has like the damage bonus while healthy. The Blood Golem is, I have tested it, less damage than the Bone Golem. The Bone Golem attacks at twice the rate of the other golems, which makes it just proc more times of Mendeln. So it is just the highest damage golem for the sake of Mendeln. And the minion builds that are not going to use Bone Golem, they're going to struggle with corpses, so they're going to end up using Reavers. The Reavers do much less than the Skirmishers, and I've actually tested the damage breakdown on single target. So if you use the Golem Glyph and the Golem board, the Golem is about 35% of your damage, and the Skeleton Warriors are about 45 to 50% of your damage. The mages actually do very low damage, but when you're actually playing the game, the damage uptime changes because the mages have slightly better uptime than the warriors because they're range instead of melee, and the golem has the highest uptime because you can break its crowd control with the golem button. So lots of different things that you can do there. It's really one of those cases where there's very few wrong ways to build this. You know, if you like the Blood Golem for its damage cooldown, use the Reapers. It's not going to be that much worse, and that's really cool. Rarely do we have a moment in time where you can just kind of play the type of build that you want and you're not really punished for doing so. For Mercenaries, it's a bit harder to cap resist, so I am just going to use Rahir for resists, and Bastion is always pretty nice. Aldkin with the Field of Languish can give you some damage reduction. It's not too bad. For skills, we're going heavy on passives. There's really nothing that stands out too much here. I just want to point out a few things that are new since last season. So the Spiked Armor gives you block chance. So the block chance is 20% damage reduction when you block. You can block without a shield, so this is just a good node to get. The barrier will proc off your minion hits because your minions inherit your lucky hit now. So having constant barrier uptime is just absolutely effortless now for necromancers. So the curse are automatically applied, but I really like casting Decrepify. However, if you don't have Decrepify on your bar and you instead put your Reap on your bar, you won't really ever use the Reap, but the new Reaper's Pursuit passive, so for each darkness skill on your skill bar, you gain 6% increased movement speed and 6% more damage. You would use this if you're like min-max trying to clear like a really high level pit, or if you're just absolutely crushing the content and you just want 6% more movement speed. So again, you can play around with that a little bit. You can use Corpse Tendrils with the Vulnerable. It will effectively be a damage increase because you can get the Vulnerable on the monsters right away, but you can also apply Vulnerable through Soul Rift. So It just kind of depends. Normally, I would always suggest that you go with 30% chance for a blood orb when damaging enemies, but because now you get like just absolute insane constant barrier from lucky hit procs and soul rift, you're not really healing yourself very much, and you might be like, well, you still heal the minions. That's true, you still heal the minions, but with the new Kalan's edict, if one of your minions die, they do 20% more damage for 3 seconds. So you actually kind of want one of your minions to occasionally die now. It's kind of a bit of a weird playstyle. A little bit of Paragons to go through. So the Paragon has changed since previous patches. Because I did testing on the golems actually don't do the most damage. The most damage comes from your skeleton warriors, which is why it's actually really important to get the warrior damage nodes on the cult leaderboard. We do have a new change with Scent of Death. So Scent of Death is now 15 damage reduction and 30 crit multi. Now that is about the same damage as using the golem board, which doubles your golem damage. So you might be thinking, well, why don't we just use the golem board? Honestly, it's a matter of playstyle. I do like the Scent of Death board because it just has really good nodes. You have maximum life, which converts into overpower damage, keep that in mind, and straight up damage reduction. Just really good nodes. If I was going to drop a board for the Golem board, I would probably drop the Curse board because you only get the full effect of Frailty if something has been cursed for 4 seconds. And if you're kind of playing the build at its strongest, just power clearing pits, things are just not really cursed for 4 seconds other than the boss, and you shouldn't really have any trouble there. You can also use the Golem Glyph. It is pretty competitive to amplify, so again, a matter of playstyle. Do you want your Golem to do a little bit more damage because it's the minion that can break crowd control and you can control yourself a lot better? Then use the Golem Glyph because you can put more damage into that. Do you want just to do more damage overall, just slightly, and you have a really good curse uptime? Use Amplify. Again, really cool season because minions are definitely back and you are just able to build the summoner that you want. And I hope my build guide on Mobalytics serves as at least a starting point and a good guideline on how you can play the build. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.